parents, but let's see what we have with us. Of course, we have the one and only Sheikh Walid Basyouni. In case anybody forgot, don't mess with Sheikh Walid. We have Sheikh Muhammad Faqih visiting from Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis Islamic Center. He's an imam there. Also, he's an Al-Maghrib instructor, one of the old school Al-Maghrib instructors, and a legend in his own right. Is that right,
Is
Sheikh?
old school a praise or?
Yeah, it's like OG, Sah ya Shabab, OG. OG is a big deal, right? Everything's OG now. Hatta things that are not OG are OG, just to make it look
OG.
OG. What do you think, Sheikh Muhammad?
Hikam, mashallah.
Huh?
I called him yesterday a senior instructor.
Yes, salam. That might not be too much of a senior age-wise or senior experience-wise.
Both, ya Sheikh.
Yeah.
Both.
Inshallah.
All right. You guys know Sheikh Muhammad Faqih, right? My favorite story about Sheikh Muhammad Faqih, he was leading Taraweeh in a masjid in Virginia. And he was at witr and he was hooking up the dua. So some guy loved it so much, in the middle of the dua, everyone's like, Ameen, Ameen. The guy screams, Takbir! And the worst part is a group of people said, Allahu Akbar! In the middle of the salah, in the middle of the dua.
Did they make sujood after that?
All right.
Huh?
أنا may sujood.
You made sujood.
So not to laugh, huh? Okay, and we have with us today our other guest is Dr. Uwaymir Anjum. He's the Imam Khattab Endowed Chair of Islamic Studies of the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at the University of Toledo. And his work focuses on the nexus of theology. Not just theology, the nexus of theology. Some of you don't know what that means. You're like, this is deep. Okay? That's fine. That's the whole point. That's why he chose the word nexus, right? Doctor?
طبعا.
I'm just kidding. Ethics, political law, and Islam with comparative interest in Western thought. So we'll start with you. Like, is there? So obviously you're visiting Houston from Ohio. Are there? What kind of projects are you currently working on?
بسم الله الحمد لله.
Welcome شيء على طول.
لا طوالي, we do business
Straightforward
here.
project.
يا ما شاء
أهلا
الله.
وسهلا. أهلا وسهلا Sheikh. Welcome to Houston. We're
الحمد لله.
really happy to have you. It's really a pleasure for me to meet you
You
actually.
want me to give you the microphone? I have.
طيب تفضل.
Go ahead.
جزاكم الله خيرا. It's a pleasure to be here. I teach Islamic studies at the University of Toledo, but I also I'm editor-in-chief at the Yaqeen Institute since last year, and I founded another institute called the Ummatics Institute, where the focus is to study Islamic civilization and work toward revival and reunification of the Muslim Ummah in the academy, in the Western as well as Islamic academic settings in the universities and whatnot. So those are the two main projects of Yaqeen and Ummatics.
Wonderful. Welcome, and may Allah give you tawfiq in all your endeavors.
I mean,
كده ينفع؟
Ummatics, this is related to Ummah, صح?
exactly. Ummatics is شؤون الأمة.
Okay.
To
So what's this interesting? What you guys do?
So this is based in my PhD and the book that I wrote in 2012, published at the Cambridge University Press. It's called Politics, Law and Community, and I know Sheikh Walid is going to like this. Politics, Law and Community in Islamic Thought, the Taymiyyah Moment. So it's about the thought of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah and political thought and his political critique of certain classical developments in Islam, and how to go back to the early vision of Islam when Islam was politically, and by politically I mean in terms of the Ummah, it was stronger and more vibrant, whereas at the time, in the classical period time, the Crusades and the Mongol period after which Shaykh al-Islam came, it became divided, and people were worried more about their madhab and defending their territory rather than worrying about the ummah. So my thesis in that book is that this was one of the fundamental projects of Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, which is why he made many of his ijtihadat, not to divide the ummah, but in fact to focus on unifying the ummah, which is why, of course, he also wrote many of his works. My dissertation was on Daru Ta'arud al-Aql wal-Naql, the political aspects of the epistemology. But the more famous work that most people can understand is Raf' al-Malam an A'immat al-A'lam, that all of the Imams of Islam were legitimate and valid and grounded in the Sunnah. Because at this time there was a big fight between the Hanafis and the Hadith and other people. So this was one of the ways in which he wanted to unite the Ummah. Anyway, so the long story short, in that book my thesis was that the Ummah, rather than the city, state, or politics, it should be called ummatics, because the center of, the unit of analysis in Islam, I'm having difficulty translating now. The unit of analysis in Islam, in Islamic thought, is not, not a nation state like Egypt or Pakistan or Saudi. The way Muslims, what Muslim ulama wrote about, from al-Mawardi or al-Ghazali or al-Juwayni or Ibn Taymiyyah or Abu Ya'la al-Farra and the rest of them, they wrote about the Ummah. And this is why sometimes we cannot understand what they were writing about, because we're trying to read it in a secular world. So anyway, that was the idea, is ummatics, meaning that we should think about the Ummah first, rather than whatever nation state, secular or not secular, whatever you're part of, Islam, the concern in Islam should be with the Ummah. So that's the idea of ummatics.
Nice. It's very interesting because tomorrow, many of Al-Maghrib instructors gathering to celebrate 20 years of Al-Maghrib contribution to Dawah. And actually, the theme of the talk is all about nation builders. So it's all about also how to build this ummah, how to, to bring it together, to lay the foundations. And lucky you, I have to testify, because Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah is an encyclopedia, like an amazing how many PhDs written about this man and master's theses around the world. Even my PhD is about him from a completely different, perspectives. Talk about him and his way of establishing the unseen world. How can we understand? So it's amazing how many theses are out there. I think there's somebody have counted more than 500 theses been written between PhD and masters just about the work of Ibn Taymiyyah. That's an incredible amount of work in an academic world, academic setting, like between a PhD and a master thesis. So it's just interesting. Good to have you, Dr. Nafa'allah bika al-ummah ya Rabb. Bismillah.
All right, so we're talking about the rights of parents. And
From
I want
ummah to ummi.
Naam? Yeah, by the way, I like that term, ummatics. Yani. I also teach things in this masjid, salatics, for example, I've taught that, and so on and so on. All right, tough crowd. The rights of parents. A lot of parents think that when they have problems with their children, they come up to me or to Sheikh Walid, please give a khutbah about the rights of parents, and that one khutbah will fix every problem, right? So my first question is, what is wrong, or do you agree that something is wrong? Parents all over complaining from the children, everything is a debate, a complaint, talking back, rudeness, all kinds of things. Is it that, well, I'm not going to give the answers away, but what is it? Is it they don't know the rights of their parents? Or is it something changed fundamentally in the style of parenting? What do you think is the issue? Maybe let's start with Sheikh Walid.
Unfortunately, we're not the only one who are raising our children. So our children risen and educated and influenced by so many factors other than parents. So you shouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of behavior and things that very different than what you're expecting, because so many times we don't pay attention to these things until later on. So the TV already have contributed. There is a lecture of Shaykh Muhammad Sharif rahimahullah. Among the first lectures that I heard from him, it's called The Third Parent, which is the TV. But today it is not
Good
the
old
TV,
days.
huh?
Good old days.
Yeah, now it's not TV, it's the, YouTube, it is so many, other media outlets, they shaping, how our children behave and how they'll see parents. Also society, school, community, and you yourself. So it's so important to understand that you sometimes, you figure that out later. So I don't think it just, there's many factors for the change. Definitely there is a problem. There is a big problem. And I think the problem is the manifestation of when it comes to children, it is, if you look and you put this under the microscope, you will find that this problem exists not only with parents, exists also with relatives, exists with elders, how they respect elders, how they deal with society at large. I always say, and with this, when I first came to United States, I came here older, like I didn't grow up in America, I wasn't raised here. One of the things that got me so in love with the society here, something silly, but I was like amazed by it. That's how everybody so courteous to others, like in for example, coffee shop, somebody hold the door for you, open the door for you. That doesn't happen where I grow up. Nobody ever do that for you, smiling. So these little things. But notice right now, you will find a lot of young people don't have this anymore. And I can see it in this 20 years, how the society shift. People just don't care anymore. Nobody smile, nobody say hi, nobody talk, when you're on the line. So there is a shifting in society at large, and that affecting our children when they deal with us. And I think there is a lack of knowledge about this subject for our children. They don't know Islamically what also the right of parents and how important this is in Islam.
All right. Anything left, Sheikh Muhammad?
I think it's a very complex issue. First of all, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's great to actually share a panel with two, mashallah, great assets the Muslim community have in North America has, And I'm talking about myself and Sheikh Kamal. No, Dr. Uwaimir and Dr. Walid Bassiouni, I feel very honored to be here. But I think this issue is very complex, especially given the fact that there's a massive cultural shift that happened. And Sheikh Walid said, over the past 20-something years, I came to America in 1991, so it's more than 30 years, and I could see what he's talking about. It's not the same culture anymore. So even people who are born and raised here in this culture, they're actually complaining about the cultural shift. And the changes that are taking place are so rapid that we're not able to actually, adjust to them, right? So if there's one, and SubhanAllah, I was talking about this a few days ago, and someone shared with me some of the works of Dr. Leonard Sachs, because I was talking about how there is, parents have been, stripped of their authority, right? There's this fear of something called authority, because authority leads to,
abuse,
authoritarian, or abuse of power. You have people who have an issue with the entire, someone having power over someone else, right? Across the board, right? So, where I said in Islam, the Islamic thought, or is about, it's not about power. Authority is about duty and responsibility, and you're held accountable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And parents do have duty towards their children, and they answer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, in an Islamic setting, the parent or whoever is responsible answers to someone higher than them. They answer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Parents answer to Allah azza wa jal. In this society, you answer to the child. You answer to the school district. You answer to, to everyone else. Yeah. So I think there's this cultural shift, and many other factors are leading to what we see right now with parents completely losing control over their household.
All right, very good. Dr. Uwaymir, your thoughts?
Well, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah. I agree with both of the shuyukh. Of course, there is a cultural shift that is very recent, and then there is the political element, meaning that the modern nation state, has replaced the role of the husband and the father. Right? And this is not accidental. This is part of certain ideological movements against traditional religion, which are spreading, of course, to the Muslim world, and they're spreading to the Muslim communities, whose purpose is to destroy what they call patriarchy, right? And the destruction of patriarchy means destroy the authority of the father in particular. And for the mother,
And by extension, the mother as well.
the mother as well, but the motherhood is treated in a different way. Motherhood is denigrated because the woman is supposed to be freed. And the fatherhood is denigrated because father is responsible for everything, for the old patriarchy. So you will notice, for example, there is all a cultural analysis. I did not grow up in this country, so for me it's academic stuff. I read about this stuff. I don't know the shifts in the media myself. Before the 90s, I came in the 90s like Sheikh Muhammad. But I came for studying, so I never knew what the television is like in America until more recently. But there are a lot of studies that show that the role of the father in the media, the role of the father in sitcoms, for example, in the movies, in the books, it is really shocking how the father is always the bad guy. Almost in every show, every movie, and every book,
Or the idiot.
the problem for why somebody became a killer or became abusive or became a criminal, or just has a bad personality is because of the father. Either because the father was absent or because the father was there but was drunk and was beating up on everyone. So basically, and the fathers that appear, right? The fathers that are there, they're supposed to be goofy and silly, and they're supposed to play that role. Otherwise, and this was different even in the 80s. And that's what the shuyukh are talking about. This is a country, of course, a Christian country, secular country, Kafir country, but the traditional norms, even here, after were still such that fathers were respected. Fathers were seen as people who brought the family together, had some wisdom, and that has changed. So that is a very a recent phenomenon that everybody is struggling with, the society in general. The vast number of children in America, just in the 80s and 90s, were born within marriage. Now, nearly 50%, and that's a radical change, nearly 50% are being born out of wedlock, outside of marriage, which is leading to other crises. So we're living in a society which, even by its own standards, is in serious decline.
Yes.
So this adds to our challenge, but also I would say that every challenge in our deen is also an opportunity. So we should also think about how to turn this into an opportunity, inshallah.
Nice.
That's so true. The worst example, when you look at these Disney sitcoms where the stars are the kids, it's all about their life and what happened. Those are the worst because the parents are just like extras in the background. and the dad comes in with some kind of dumb invention, and the kid tells him, it's not going to work, and the dad goes up, it blows up on his face, he comes back, I told you so, dad. They make the dads look like just bumbling, buffoons. In the commercials, they don't know what's going on. Even the father, like the mother's the smart one, and then the father's always the dumb one who wants to buy the wrong product. Always portrayed that way. Someone here from the community, I'm not sure who it was, maybe it was Dr. Sharif, he said, or somebody here was commenting, he said one of the problems are our children, they don't know how to behave with us because here we're just the nuclear family. Whereas overseas, they see you dealing with your parents. And they see how you respect your father, and they see how you respect your mother, and they see, like, this is how you respect your elders and your parents. But they don't have that example in front of them. It's just the immediate family or the nuclear family. And, for the most part, they think you're their friend or something like that, which in
And
some
everyone
cases.
watches you too.
What's that?
In these societies, people watch what you do, and they judge you or they try to correct you, right?
The kids themselves.
No, everyone around you, the uncles, the aunts, the cousins, the neighbors sometimes, even the security guard, right? Everyone, it takes so everyone is reinforced, there is culture. So I guess what you're saying is that there is culture and it's being reinforced everywhere.
Right.
Where here, there's no culture.
But I will pick on this. I say, it is important, based on what we hear, to let your kids know about how you treated your parents. Even if they didn't see it, tell them stories about it. Share them stories about the early generations. Tell them the story of Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, how he used to treat his mother. Tell them the story of, Ahmed and Imam Ahmed with his. Either stories are meant to inspire. So even if they never seen you, it is so important for them to share with them. But in regard to this, I just want to say, and that's an area actually we need to be smart about it. I think there is an area when it comes to birr al-walidain and respecting parents, there is a nuance to it. In another word, there is certain words, there is concept in Islam are related to culture, are not defined by Sharia, and neither are defined linguistically. They left to the culture of the people, to the norm, which is we call urf. So for example, respect. There is a certain level of respect defined, known by Sharia. But there is other form of respect that can be different from one culture to another, from one generation to another. So sometimes what happens, parents demand a certain type of respect or way of talking. So, كَانَ يُكَلِّمْ أُمَّهُ كَمَا يُكَلِّمُ الْأَمِيرُ. He talked to his mother the way he talks to a king. Your kids didn't see the king. Do you see how they talk to Biden? It's to tell them stories like this is not going to resonate. So, for example, I came from a culture, we don't kiss dad's hand. It's not part of my culture. I never kissed my dad's hand. It's just not part of my culture. That's not how I raised. That's not how I display my respect. And I was around another culture, who do that. Certain culture, they kiss the father. So they do this. So sometimes I think we became kind of artificial, or we demand certain things. We need to choose our battle wisely. There is certain standard. I understand that the bar going lower and lower, but that's will be a challenge for us as a community, as a family. Where I set my bar, where is the thing that is a common sense that I have to look at it. But it will be a mistake if you want to raise your kids when it comes to your rights and how they deal with you in the same level of some completely different culture that they can't relate to. Especially if it's not required by Sharia. Because again, your kids are not a Pakistani kids or an Egyptian kids or Moroccan kids or Indonesian kids or Malaysian kids. They are American kids. So you have to take that in consideration and to choose wisely where to set the bar, where you can relate to them, where you can meet in the middle, where there's no violations of Sharia and also no violation of a common sense good manners.
That's a great point. I remember one time someone was giving a khutbah and he was saying, do not walk in front of your father. And he said, you shouldn't do that. But this is not, culturally, this is not a big deal if you walk in front of your father or behind him My father would always tell me to walk in front of him. Go run ahead and make sure everything. I'm always ahead of him. There was nothing wrong with that culturally. And I remember this one guy, he was giving.
I just shared that hadith not too long ago.
Naam?
I shared that hadith in my community not too long ago.
And what did you tell him? Not to walk in front of their father?
No, I didn't put it this way. What I said is that
There is a hadith, don't not walk in front of your
not
father?
hadith, like
Story.
Abu Huraira.
Oh, okay.
Abu Huraira saw two men walking, right? A younger, man with an older man. So he asked the younger man, "Who is this?" So he said, "This is my father." So something must have caught his attention. So he said to him, "Never call him by his name, right? First name. Never walk in front of him, and do not sit before him, right?" So I mentioned this, but then we have to be nuanced. We have to explain what that means.
Right.
To me, one of the greatest lessons of this is not necessarily the specifics that are mentioned by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh. These were the norms of conduct at their time, and it was not acceptable for a child to do that. To me, was the fact that Abu Hurairah was at liberty to actually engage this young man, and then the young man was listening to him and taking that advice from him, right? The father didn't interfere and say, "Hey, what are you doing? Talk to my, I'm supposed to be parenting my child, not you."
No one talks to my child except me.
Yeah. And that Abu Hurairah felt that these were very important things to bring up, radiallahu anhu arda, and he shared that with him. And it appeared that the young man was receptive and that he accepted that advice. So after I gave that story, I told him how me personally, I'm my father's youngest child. My father comes from a culture where we kiss hands, by the way. I remember one time my father was sitting amongst a group of men, so I shook hands with everyone. I wasn't sure, I was conflicted, should I kiss his hand or not, because I didn't kiss anyone else's hand. So when I came to him and I shook his hands and I didn't kiss it, it was weird, it was awkward for him, so he looked at me, so I was like, "Okay, I'll kiss." That's fine. I kissed his hand, rahimahullah ta'ala. But I remember one time walking in Virginia, we were walking and then I stood next to him and we were walking together, and I came on the side of the road, And as we were walking, I was afraid that he may fall. Right? He was in his 70s. So I put my hand around his shoulder. We walked for a while, and then at some point he's like, "By the way, right, I have no idea what got into your head. What makes you think that it's okay for you to put your hands around me like I'm your buddy?"
Nice.
So he said it in a very loving way and stuff like that, but it was obvious that he wasn't comfortable, right? So I put my hands down and I said, "Dad, I was just trying to be very protective, but you are my buddy. Sometimes I feel like you're my friend." So he looked at me, he took that joke, he took it. But my older brother, who's 20 years older than me, looked at me and said, "Listen, how dare you do things that, he wouldn't dare to do certain things that my father was okay."
A cultural change.
Yeah, so there is a cultural, change. And again, this is where urf, right, comes in. So, but again, nonetheless, in my heart, I would never disrespect my father or say anything disrespectful to him. I wouldn't dare to do that, but I don't think it's the same thing now,
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Just a few weeks ago, I was listening to this sheikh who was alive in our times, and he was telling a story about how some of his childhood friends from high school, what have you, they were all religious, all four of them. Then one of them started to hang out with other people and ended up in jail and what have you. Then he says, one time he was talking to his father in front of me, and he raised his voice at his father. And what amazed me was the sheikh said, "I was so shocked. I've never in my life heard someone raise their voice at their father." He said, "I never in my life heard this, that someone would raise their voice at their father." And I think now this is like, standard operating procedure in the house.
I'm very intolerant of this, especially disrespect. If it happens in front of me, whether it's in my community or at the school, if I see a child raising their voices or disrespecting their parents in front of me, I take this very, very seriously. I get personally offended if the person felt comfortable doing this. And people in my community...
So what do you do? Like, let's say your son or your daughter threw a fist and raised their voice, say, "Get out of here, get out of my room," stuff like that. What would you do? Not
Just-
Sheikh Kamal.
Yeah. Out of fear of lawsuits and all kinds of other issues, let's talk with
Go ahead, Doctor.
Doctor,
No, I'm just here to.
What's your reaction to that?
What my reaction? So, alhamdulillah, I have 5 kids, and my older 2 are in college, alhamdulillah. And so kids sometimes talk back, but I don't remember, an instance where, where somebody would raise their voice as in a disrespectful way. I mean, of course, in annoyance, very much so. And but if something like this happens,
What parents
you
should do?
cannot, you cannot. Or rather, it must have happened, but something that's not a regular occurrence. But if it happens, you have to understand that you have the role of the sole provider now, and the sole provider of, you have no support, right? As Shaykh have said before, nobody else. If you lose this child, there is no one else that's going to support you. Meaning that if you lose his or her respect, he's not going to go to an uncle, he's not going to go to a grandfather, he's not going to go to a school teacher who is going to support you. You're the only one, so you cannot behave in the way that you might have felt comfortable behaving in a different traditional society, or even in this society 50 years ago. So you have to, therefore, you have a harder job as a parent, but you better do that job now rather than lose your children. So that is, so what is your job? Your job is to earn respect and to become a role model. And how do you earn respect? Well, that's the challenge I think that we should be talking about. That is what are the means by which parents earn respect, not at the moment when there is a crisis, but in the long run, right? How do you raise your children? Right. And similarly for children, they need to know that this is an ideal and this is a good behavior for me in the long run. And also, I'll give you an example. Now, this is going to be a little bit longer, but hopefully you're not going to ask me too many more questions after that.
All right, go for it.
Nuremberg. What happened in Nuremberg? Does anybody know? Nuremberg trials. So philosophers ask this question, that one of the worst criminals, some of the worst criminals who put the Jews in gas chambers and killed lots and lots of them in, where the answer of these criminals, right, people like Eichmann, for instance, their answer was that the state told me, somebody told me to do this, to kill people. My job, I was an engineer, and my job as an engineer was to build a gas chamber where I'll kill a lot of people. It was not my job to ask questions. My job was, and everybody taught me, the society taught me to do what I'm told, and the state, the German state, had a very authoritarian, modern, democratic, but authoritarian culture. So the philosophers asked themselves this question: what would this guy, Eichmann, need to learn as a child so that if he's ever put in that position, that he will not use that excuse, but rather he will have a different answer, that he will not put innocent people in gas chamber just because some authority teaches him that. And I often think that that's a good question for Muslim parents to think about, and that way of thinking. This society is going to teach your children to do a lot of things and different kinds of norms. To go out with, commit zina, that's the least of your problem these days. Of course, it's a big problem, but there are many bigger problems. So this is a society that's going to teach your child to do haram and be proud of haram and to fight other people for the sake of haram. And I feel that our children are like that Eichmann, that guy who failed in that task, right? What would you need to do? So anyway, I will give you only one answer that I like and I remember. This philosopher, who's a Christian Catholic philosopher, Alistair McIntyre, he said, look, the only way you can raise a child who will not be Eichmann is if that child growing up was number one, he was told ethics, he was told the right thing to do. Number two, he saw you do the right thing, but that's not enough. And that's the point I want to emphasize. Number three, this child was able to apply that standard that you taught him on you by objecting to you. So if somebody calls and you tell them, or somebody comes to the door, he said, tell them Baba is not home or Mama is not home. Your child should be able to say to you, Baba, lovingly, politely, you are lying and you know lying is haram. Tell me something I can tell without lying. That ability to use that ethical imperative, that ethical truth that we teach our children. Similarly, salah. You teach your children to go to salah. Does your child have the freedom and the courage and the practice to tell you when you're delaying your salah, Mama, it's time for salah. Let's pray first. To say politely, but the child, if that child does not have that courage to object to you politely, then one or two things will happen. The child will be scared to apply the standards that are in his or her mind, or when he or she sees too much dissonance, as it's called. You teach one thing, you do one thing, another thing, then he or she is going to explode, meaning he will either lose respect for you or lose respect for your teachings altogether, and then it's going to be too late. So basically the short answer is, after which Sheikh Kamal is not going to ask me any other questions, is let them practice adab, let them practice akhlaq, but also let them object to you in a way that's polite, so that they don't have to do that in a way that's impolite.
Well said.
Now.
One of the things I want to say, I think if we come out of this setting, just focus on the issue of respect, because it's a big thing. I give you a practical example as well about your children. Respect their choices. So many times parents don't respect their kids' choices. If they choose a color or a meal or in the restaurant, be respectful and mindful. If they're doing something wrong, wearing clothes that it is not safe for them to wear because of the weather, you can talk to them. But you have to make sure that you show them that it is basically you respect their choice, you respect their opinion. And that's so important to build that, so they feel respected, so basically they replicate that and they respect you back. Also the way you talk to them. It's important. I know sometimes we kind of lose it, we don't pay, but you know what? Addressing them with respect, it basically reinforces, you get back what you give. I've seen some of my teachers dealing with their parents. And I give you an example of my own life. Since I was in high school, my father never, most of the time he will call me Sheikh Walid. He will address me like Sheikh. Since I start learning and memorize the Quran and I became he will always address me as Sheikh. And you don't know how much, I never felt arrogant as much as I felt respected. And there's a big difference between the two.
Sheikh, did you feel respected or did you feel loved and appreciated?
Both. But respected was something that it is, that's why for me personally, respect is a very big deal.
Yeah.
Because I saw how my own father respecting me when he deal with me. You know, my father would never ever, even my brother once told my father, you raise your voice on us, why not Walid? He said, he's a sheikh. He never raised his voice. He is, you know, he treated me, I wish they treated everybody the same. You know, I had a rough moment with my father. Yani, don't think I, you know, especially when I was younger, but that meant a lot to me. And I think it's important for us to remember that. You know, I remember also many examples. So some shaykh I saw, wallahi, I know one of my teachers, I couldn't tell from the way they treat each other who's the father, who's the son. The father respects the son so much that yani you will say, this is the son, not the father. The way they treat each other. So showing that is so important. And also there are so many studies shows that if you want to teach your kids respect, make sure that you treat your spouse with respect in front of your children.
Very true.
Yeah, by the way, that I fully agree with. And I agree with many of the points that were mentioned regarding parenting. But here I think we need to address the issue of how children should respect and honor and love their parents. Right?
That was what your khutbah was about today.
Yeah. So to me, I personally think that there's something that needs to really be corrected here. I don't think parents, and I love Sheikh Walid and he's my mentor and my teacher, but allow me, Sheikhna, to disagree. I don't think parents have to respect their children. Parents have to care for their children, love their children, and they do, genuinely do love. Most parents love, the Prophet ﷺ teaches us, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, إِنَّمَا فَاطِمَةُ بِضْعَةٌ مِّنِّي. You're a part of me. I don't know of anyone who's willing to sacrifice their whole for the sake of a piece of them, except a parent. A mother would be willing to give up her life. A father would be, killing himself, right, just to be able to, secure a decent living for his kids. Any dad will die. And I think children need to understand this. One of the things, Sheikhna, that happened with me, I had my first child after my father passed away, 2 years after my father passed away. When I held my son, the first time I held my son and I looked at him, that feeling that I felt, I said, if my father felt that way about me, just for that, I should have just served him. I should have just, been completely obedient. If he felt it, and I know that he must have felt about me, right, the same way, if not great, and he was a much better dad, right? So children need to understand that you belong to your parents, you belong to your mother, you belong to your father.
So you don't feel that they're deserving any respect from the
I
parent?
have an issue with this whole thing nowadays that parents have to basically beg their children, please go and do such and such. No, you should tell
But
that.
we're not saying that. That's the other extreme. We're not saying that.
Yeah.
We're not saying
But-
begging them, but you can say please.
But like, I'll give you an example. I know someone, he said, growing up, my father never respected my time or what I was doing or my opinion. He just in the middle of anything just stopped me like that. And I never felt like
to me,
there was-
that's not love and care. That's not love, or that's
But
not.
Sheikh,
yeah.
emotions, and it's very hard to define these things. Yani, it's very hard, almost impossible to define what respect is, what's love and caring is. These are very hard to define, as you know. So there is a cross lines here.
Yeah, but Sheikhna, I think that we have to be very extremely, nuanced and careful with our choice of words, because it may send the wrong message, right?
Go both ways.
Any decent parent that I know, when they tell their children to do something, it's not because they're trying to be disrespectful or they don't. It's probably because they thought that is what is best for
Sheikh,
that
wallahi,
child.
يعني, there is parents that قم يا حمار.
No, that's wrong. That's abusive.
disrespect.
Sheikh.
That's this. He give him name. Hey, idiot.
Yeah.
That's disrespect.
Yeah, but that's
Hey,
not love,
until
Sheikh.
when you're gonna be
But,
like
but
that? There is
a
that
loving
reality.
parent wouldn't do that.
No, they love their kids for to death, but they will say use word like that. He would never respect your
Sheikh,
time.
I know a
he
father-
would never respect your privacy too.
I know a father that calls his son Ibn al-Kalb.
Yeah, but that's
He might be right in that
wait,
situation.
Sheikh, analyze that, Sheikh Kamal. He's calling his son Ibn al-Kalb, oh son of a dog. Who is he insulting here?
The
This is-
son.
he's insulting himself.
No, that's called in
Sheikh.
Arabic language phrase.
No, Shaykhna,
It
Shaykhna.
doesn't, you don't take phrases literally.
The point I'm trying
It's
to
like
make.
ثكرتك أمك. You
No,
don't
no,
take
no, no.
these
The point
things.
I'm trying to make is this is a father that does not have self-respect.
Yes.
He doesn't have self-respect, right? When they do something like this, or this is just their way of being loving. Because in some families, in some cultures, people call each other ahbal, habla, right? And it's an endearment, right? تعال يا أهبل, تعال يا عبيط, you know, different things. It's an endearment, and that's not what I'm talking about.
You know something? My wife read me something interesting today. She said, it's in Arabic culture. She said the women are strange. The thing says women are strange. When they're friends with each other, they call each other فينك يا هبلة تعالي يا حمارة. And then whenever they're fighting with each other, اسمع يا حبيبتي. Anyways, so like derogatory terms when they're on good terms, and then when they're fighting with each other, sweetheart, listen to me.
Sheikh Kamal, I panic when I see children not realizing that they're, you know, the value of their parents. You know why? For their own good.
That's something I agree.
For their own good. For their own good. Because I've seen people who disrespected their parents or abused their parents, and what happened to them eventually. To me, Sheikh, when I see my kids, for instance, doing something that I find to be disrespectful, to me, I address it differently. When I see them doing something to to their mother, I pull them aside and I say, you must be out of your mind. You know what happens to people who disrespect their mothers or offend them? And I tell them stories, not from the time of the Sahaba or the Tabi'een, no. Things that I've seen with my own eyes and I have experienced of people, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really just, how individuals destroy their own lives, right? By abusing
But
their
you really
parents.
think a kid will resonate?
Use a better example. You tell them, look what happened last week when I disrespected your mother. I can show you the injuries.
Yeah. With all seriousness, Chef, with all seriousness, I want to say this to the parents, because I am 100% in favor of, if you see your children disrespected you or disrespected your spouse, so if you're the father, respect the mother, the vice versa, make sure that you don't just let it go. Don't make a fight over it, but at least you have, even when they come down, you said, by the way, when you talked about this, that's not right. That's not how you're taught. Because if you don't say anything, they will repeat it again and again and again. And don't be tired, don't be angry. And your kids must understand that your reaction is not about you, that your ego got injured, that you get disrespected. It is also about that you love and you want good for them. Like what the Shaykh is saying, you know what happened to people who disrespect their parents. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inna Allah yaghdab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala angry at those who made their parents angry, who disrespect. So it's about you and for your own sake too. And basically that's not how you talk to your dad. That's not how you talk to your mom. And I think that's, I always say, don't just let it go. Don't be tired of saying it. You don't need to lecture them 20 minutes about it, but at least to make that point. That's not how you talk. That's not how you look at your mom. That this hand gesture is not correct. Al-Ajib, yani, Ibn Abbas, for example, said, وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفْ قَالْ هَكَذا.
Just the gesture.
Just
with
the
hand.
gesture with the hand. It's not even a word. You know, so even gesture like hand gesture or eye contact, or things like that, just make a comment, make sure that you teach it. And I will promise you something. Certain things my parents used to tell me, and I think a lot of people can share this with me. There's certain things you will say it now, you think is not registered, you think is not, maybe they will not agree with you, but later on, they will remember it.
Yes.
So make sure you don't be, it's like a seed. You put it and you plant it, and inshallah Azza Jal it will, but don't ever hold back from saying the right thing in the right way.
Sheikh, I was attending a talk by a knowledgeable person, and he was advising some parents, and he was telling them, if your child says something rude to you, and not even child, like even up to a teenager or what have you, he said, it's okay. He said, absorb it. Let them know that they're safe, that they can vent, that they can say these things to you, even if they're rude. Don't show them that you're offended. So I want to know what you think about that. And I'm not asking Sheikh Walid, I'm not asking Sheikh Muhammad Faqih, but I'm just asking. Because like one of my goals in life is to make sure my children understand they are not safe. I'm not, you're not safe with me. I'm not going to tell you, "Oh, you're safe, this is a safe space." No, this area is very dangerous. There's caution tape around here. You will get, what do you think, Doctor?
So, wallahi, many of the points that the shuyukh are making are in fact valid. What we only need to provide is like, there is time for this, this is the context, this is the big picture. So for example, Sheikh Walid, the point that you need to respect your children, it makes sense if the children already understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions God and then He mentions parents. If they understand that, right, then, and if they are, and then your children are too terrified and you have a problem in the community where your parents are abusive toward their children only, of course superficially, because otherwise parents raise them. But then this is a good reminder. But if the problem is that children
don't know their boundaries,
do not know their boundaries at all, and if even for a father or a mother to say, "Go get water for me, please," becomes, why should I do that? And if they don't know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honors parents, it's really sometimes remarkable how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honors parents. And I know in my case, alhamdulillah, in my house, my father lives with me. And so my children see me behave toward him. I don't have to teach them how to behave.
Nice.
So having grandparents or elders in the community around and treating them in a certain way, that's wonderful. But I want to share a couple of stories that in my own mind are like the gold standard of what Islam teaches us. And then based on that, you can adjust to culture. One is this famous story, of course, in the Sahih Hadith, the story of 3 men who got stuck behind in a cave, and they were making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were asking Allah using the shafa'ah of some of their good deeds. And they tried hard to think of the best deed they have done so they could make dua based on that best deed. This is, of course, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling this story to the Sahaba. So the 3 of them, each one of them thought the best deed they did. One of them that always stuck with me is this man said, "Oh Allah, I had old parents, and then I had children and my wife, and it was my habit that I would feed them, give the dinner to my parents first before my wife and children. In one time, the dinner was late and my parents fell asleep. They're old, they're waiting for food, dinner is late. So when the food was ready, I did not want to wake them up because they're sleeping, and I did not want to feed anyone else." Now you could say, Shar'an, from the perspective of Islamic law, there is no obligation to feed your parents before your children. But because he had made something as a matter of adab, as a matter of expectation and honor for the parents, like Sheikh Muhammad was talking about his father, kissing his hand, that almost has become an expectation of adab that his father expects, right? So it's that kind of thing. But this man says that I waited all night and my children cried and slept, fell asleep hungry. I waited for my parents to wake up on their own and then give them food and then share them out. This is a good deed that he could think that was the best deed, and Rasulullah ﷺ is telling this story to the Sahaba. So this is the level of the honor of parents above your children and your wife, who are very dear to you and they have enormous rights in Islam. But this man made this deed, and this was one of the deeds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted as one of the highest deeds. If you understand that, then demand respect from your parents. That's okay. But if you don't understand that, if you don't understand what Rasulullah says to a man, you and your property belong to your father, or if you don't understand when the Prophet said that, go serve your mother for your paradise, Jannah is under her feet. If you don't understand that, then you cannot, as a Muslim young man or a young woman, demand that you be respected, right? Because so it should have that kind of wallahu alam
Well said.
context.
Well said. I want to say something about parents as well. That I think it's lacking a lot, which is especially the young men and women here. Make sure, and it's part of the respect, I guess you can put it under that title, big title, but make sure that you show appreciation to them. Thank them, even the older ones. Even if you're 40, 50, 30. Text message your mom now after this session, or dad. Say, I just want to thank you for all the great things you do.
Subhanallah.
And if they passed away, say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rab, reward them for what they have done to me. Just show your gratitude to them. When they cook for you, when they provide meal for you, or, this is, when we say friendship, when you have a friendship with someone, part of friendship is to be appreciative of what your friend doing to you. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم said, "من أحق الناس بصحبتي." And who's the one who has the more rights when it comes to this, kind treatment? It's your parents, your mom, your mother, then your mother, then your mother, then your dad. So make sure that you express that appreciation to them. And there's another thing I want you to also learn how to express. Is to express your love for them. I don't know why we're kind of dry sometimes about this. You know what? Don't hold back, especially if you became a teenager. Hugging is not your thing. I know it's not your thing, but you know what? My dad, my mom, Shim, I love you. I really show a little bit of compassion to them, or a lot of compassion, not a little bit. That's something like, I remember one of the kids, one of the brothers was telling me here in the masjid, in our masjid here, he told him, call your mom, tell her that I love you. He said, what? I'll never say that to my mom. That's a true story here in this masjid. One of the kids, like a long time ago. He's mashallah now older.
Sheikh, now if you told him,
to say, I love you. He feels this is not a man thing. That's wrong. Show that. Push yourself, and I promise you, you'll feel good. Because الطاعة لها لذة. Good deeds had an impact. Do it sincerely for the sake of Allah. No matter how old are you, no matter how young you, no matter how far you are from your parents, just show that. Say, I love you. Thank you. Give them a hug. Show that compassion and closeness to them.
Sheikh Muhammad, you want to say something?
No, if Sheikh Wali said to him, this is a social experiment, I'm doing a little video here, call your mom right now and tell her that you love her on camera, and let's see how she reacts, he would have done it.
It'd be nice.
That's a good, because then if the mother is shocked, then he never says that. Right? If she's like,
Anyone want to volunteer?
The ones who are confident.
Do you want to volunteer? If my mom alive, I would have done it.
Call. I just looked at the clock. I think my mother is asleep right now. She's at Eastern Standard Time. But I would have done it. I would have done it on camera right now. Just call her and say, I love you. I'm so sorry. Forgive me for being such a...
You're
that's
confident
nice.
in the answer.
Okay. That's awkward. That's not awkward. It's actually 100% normal. Say, I love you, Mom.
I heard this story of someone who was alive in our time. I really loved it. Because it's sometimes these nice things and very different and creative things that can make a nice difference. So he's a grown man, and his mother's an old woman, and he says, I spend on them and everything, and he's very wealthy too. But he says, I have like a ritual with my mother. Every Friday we go out to the market, we go shopping or something like that. He says, and every now and then I'll purposely not bring any money. And then I'll tell her, Mom, I forgot to bring money. This is overseas. It's like, actually, I forgot to bring my money. Do you mind paying for this for me? He says, just to make her feel that she has the upper hand, that she's spending on her son, and he has the money. And I just thought it was such a nice gesture that he's even thinking of the fact that, yeah, she hasn't been taking care of me for a while. Let me make her feel like
And
a
you know
mother.
what's nicer, Sheikh?
No.
That you pay for them,
That you pay for
your parents.
your parents. Yeah, well, he gives her the money anyways, right? So
No, they don't.
Huh?
They don't. I ask so many young, I don't want to embarrass anyone here, but I ask so many young men and women who are working, earning money, and I said, do you give money to your parents? Have you ever like decided to give something to you, like, kid of, hey, without asking, your parents don't need maybe your money, but from you. I know a brother, Sheikh, okay? He gave 25% of his income, of his money, voluntarily to his mom as a gift.
mashallah.
25% of his check goes to his mom as a gift. She's mashallah, good man, and he lived very comfortable life. I'm not saying this in the expense of making your own family suffer. No, he's very, very good, good life with his family. But you know what? First salary. I remember one of the things that people, my culture, very famous, give a whole salary. Like first one, give it to his mom. You know, just send her $1,000, $500. Just like this, it's as a gift. You know what? I couldn't see anyone does that. I couldn't remember anyone I asked them a question like this, and they said, I did that.
SubhanAllah.
Sheikh Kamal, the first 50 riyal I got, it was 10 5 riyals, brand new, right? I earned it by winning 3rd place in the Quran competition in the masjid. I was in middle school. I went and I gave it to my mom. I said, this is my gift to you, Jazakallah khair. You've been inspiring me to memorize Quran and so on. You know what she did? She saved it. She said, I'm going to keep it. This is going to be part of the mahar that I'm going to give to your bride when you get married. Yeah, you know what I mean? Subhanallah. Radiallahu anha. What I'm trying to say here, our parents don't need our contribution. It's the thought that matters, right? But the amount of blessing that comes out of it, right? When you do something for your parents as just a token of appreciation, because nobody really deserves your. Shaykhna, I was reflecting on this. The fact that Allah Azza wa Jalla says, "Anishkur li wa li walidayk." See, people who are not grateful, for their parents, whom Allah Azza wa Jalla has chosen for them to be the direct cause of their existence, to come to this. If they're not grateful and respectful and appreciative of that, right? I don't think they can be genuinely grateful or appreciative for anything else in life. And that is why it terrifies me to deal with a person who is really not grateful for their parents, right?
Well, that's so true. A friend of mine in Virginia, he was telling me his neighbors across the street, it was Thanksgiving. And I knew that their dad, so their grandfather, is coming to visit. He says, I see the day of Thanksgiving, the father comes from out of a taxi cab. And the airport's like Bush, like an hour away. They didn't go get him. He came for Thanksgiving dinner out of a taxi cab. Then he had the dinner. Then he comes out. I see a taxi cab come. He goes to his hotel room. Then in the morning, he takes a taxi back to their house, says goodbye to them, and takes a taxi back to his airport. And he just look at that. Like nobody dropped him off. They didn't let him spend the night at the house. And these things are disastrous. And like you were saying, Doctor, earlier, every movie there's a troubled, like the father, troubled father, or the girl doesn't talk to her dad for 12 years, and throughout the movie, while he's killing the bad guy, he's trying to make up with his daughter for some reason, which is the Hollywood formula. You don't make up with your daughter, be in a dangerous situation, throw her a gun, and then you get back together by the end of the movie. Like just such bad messages that youth are getting. Isn't that the case? It is, isn't it?
I guess we Last round?
We'll wrap it up.
Wrap it
I
up.
want to say that in my personal opinion, the best khutbah ever given in this masjid is a khutbah given by Sheikh Walid. It was now maybe 3 years ago or something, the rights of the parents. It was a tremendous khutbah, and I really implore everyone to go back and to listen to that khutbah and make your children listen to it. It is an amazing khutbah, and I remember an uncle came to me crying after the khutbah. He was in tears, and he was saying, and he was shaking. He was saying that khutbah was amazing, and I don't know if his parents passed or what, but it moved him so much, and I believe it's a phenomenal khutbah that everybody needs to listen to. I believe it is the best one ever given in this masjid. That could be a good wrap-up, just listening to that with your children.
I'll say like 1 minute, everyone.
Tfadla, yeah,
Wait,
1 minute
before-
everybody. I've done mine. Khalas, tfadla, Sheikh Walid.
Okay.
Mine is Sheikh Walid.
Okay, in 1 minute, very quickly. One thing I want to say, parents, make sure that you're on the same page, you and your wife, about how to talk to your children, how to teach your children certain principles of life, because that will reflect how they will treat you. 2, it's very important, I would say, when it comes to parents, is to the young men and women who listen to me right now. In our religion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us not to treat our parents based on the minimum, based on what's the right. Actually, the standard with parents is the maximum. That's why it's not uquq al-walidain, what you've been ordered to avoid only. No, it's birr al-walidain. And the word birr in Arabic language, it means the highest, like al-birr fil iman, the highest level of iman. So al-birr, it is the highest, it's the maximum. So when it comes to respect, it's not the minimum respect. It's not the minimum smile. It's not the minimum talk. It's not the minimum financial support. It's actually to go beyond what is the minimum way. So you show the utmost respect, the utmost support, the utmost love. Okay? So it's not like treating your friends or and that leads me to the last point that I end with, is make sure that that means I don't treat my parents equally. You mean to me. That's why I'm mean to you. You know, oh, you didn't do me this to me. I'm doing this to you. You don't ever treat parents like this. Parents are over here, like what you just heard, right after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's right. That does not mean that you don't have rights, but you have to understand the parents on a very, very high level. In a very honorable, they are the reason behind your existence after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So make sure that you understand that parents are like in a pedestal. It's in the highest level you can think of. So it's so important for you to keep that in mind when you deal with parents.
Jazakallah khair. Sheikh Muhammad.
Are you sure?
Closing 1 minute.
Dr. Uwaimer, go first.
طيب يلا
No,
دكتور.
go ahead, after you.
No, go ahead.
I don't know how many of you remember, older ones, older people would. What happened in 2008? Everybody remember what was happening? The big thing?
Housing market.
I had my first.
Child, okay.
Yeah.
Apart from Sheikh Muhammad's child, what else was the big news? The financial crash. So if you look at sociological data in America, there is something very interesting, which is that church attendance in America shortly spiked after 2008. People all of a sudden seem to have become religious, more religious, right? So religious trend is going down for a long period of time, right? And then in 2008, people become more religious. And so scholars try to understand what happened. This is, of course, majority of, it's a Christian question, like why are people going back to church? and the explanation that sociologists of religion have is that people lose religion in America and in the West when they move away from parents. So usually they are religious when they're young, parents are religious because of children, children are religious because of parents. There's something in family and something in the parent-child relationship. So when, because of financial difficulties, people moved back to their parents' houses throughout America, more people began to go to church. And this is just one of the many parts, many anecdotes that one can cite to this point that there is great wisdom in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us to honor our parents. It's not an arbitrary command. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows us, people who have not seen parents and have not had loving parents, loving fathers, loving mothers. They can't understand the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's cognitively difficult for them to understand and expect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like there is a creator who is taking care of me. People who have had bad parenting experience and people who have had good one, it's easy for them to think of this world as a good, kind place. And it's easier for them to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Nice.
And this, by the way, if you're looking for a nice read, for those of you who like to read books, the name of the book is called Why the West, or How the West Really Lost God. How the West Really Lost God, by a Catholic author by the name of Mary Eberstadt. How the West Really Lost God. And this is the data that she presents and analyzes. That basically, how the West really lost God was by losing family and losing respect, generation losing respect for the earlier generation, losing the connection with parents.
Yusuf, you're going to Clear Lake University.
Yes, sir. Right? Sheikh Muhammad, closing remarks.
The worst thing that a parent can do to their child is force them to rebel against God. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses this. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَإِن جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِمَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا. If your parents abuse you and force you and wage war, they come at you with everything that they've got to coerce you and to force you to worship other than Allah, to associate partners with Allah Azza wa Jalla, commit shirk, which is the worst thing, the worst crime that you can commit. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, if they do that, they try to force you to offend me, to commit the greatest offense against me. This is Allah speaking. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا. Do not obey them. You absolutely should not obey them. However, that still does not give you the right to what? Hate them, resent them, disrespect them, abuse them, cut them off. It doesn't give you the right to do that. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, in spite of that, make sure, because if you truly love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you're religious and strong in your religion, then you're going to be strong enough to realize that you don't have to obey them, you don't have to listen to that. Right? You don't have to listen to the destructive things that parents, or allow the destructive behavior of your parents to destroy you. And instead connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and still treat them well. And I see in this verse a great thing. Allah Azza wa Jalla seeks for us, or wants for us, to become strong. Spiritually, emotionally, mentally strong enough. And my word of advice is that if you're not there, if you're struggling with anything that your parents may have done in the past, or your parents are doing, right? And you're finding it very difficult to respect them, right? You're finding it very difficult to reconcile with them. You're finding it very difficult to communicate with them. Seek help, right? Seek help and rectify your relationship with your parents before it's too late, because a time will come where you're going to really regret every moment you wasted, that you could have had a good relationship with your parents and you chose not to put the effort in fixing that relationship. a time will come. So before you're there, make sure that you take full advantage of your parents' presence or them being around you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our parents and our children.
Ameen.
Ameen.
You know, 2 years ago, Sheikh Muhammad Faqih and I, we attended an all-day workshop on couples counseling. And then the instructor said something, it's one of the things that stuck with me from the whole day. He said, I had a couple, they were having problems, the husband and wife, they're having problems communicating and they're having issues. So I asked the woman about her relationship with her mother. She said it's very bad. He said, your homework, fix your relationship with your mother.
Mhm.
He said when she fixed the relationship with her mother, she automatically fixed and knew how to fix her relationship with her father. So like the effects and the barakah just permeates all into your life, into every other relationship and every other aspect. We'll end here, inshallah. I would like to thank Sheikh Walid Basuni, Sheikh Muhammad Faqih, who's in town for Ilm Fest, by the way, which is all day tomorrow. And Dr. Uvaymer, thank you very much for being with us. Jazakumullah khair, everybody, for listening attentively. Sallallahu wa barak ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.